quick story of how I met Professor Subramani. So one of our late night sessions where we were, why don't it's not saying here? Okay, the two culprits who are along with me are missing in action. They are the two guys who will provide you with the evidence. So we were having a conversation about S3 and storage and stuff like that. And we were on the fourth floor, sat next to the lift. And we overhear somebody saying, he went to med school and then he changed his career. So I got curious and I met Professor Subramani. So I'll give you a bit of his background, and then this is a very open conversation. So you feel free to actually ask questions because we've had a whole week on longevity, and like he is probably one of the few people who could give you like lots of insights, unbiased insights in that as an academic. So he went to med school like 18 years ahead of me. And after he finished, I'm definitely going to ask him like a lot more, but like, just to give you the context. And then he did his PhD in the US, and he was an academic in a bunch of universities. University of Vanderbilt, University of New Mexico, and kind of now he has a bit more time. He decided he was semi-retired, retired. So here we have Professor Subramani. Please give your hands up to him. Thank you very much for allowing us to have you here. Would you give kind of a quick summary of your journey from the med school to being an academic? So this is a rare instance. I want to give you like an idea of how rare it is. So in a med school that has a class of probably 200 people, like one person each year will actually go do something else, right? So in my batch, which is from 1991, I'm considered rare. He is a good few years ahead of me. That's like extremely rare. The discrimination one would have to face to actually do anything in math, computer science would be ridiculous. So, as an example of somebody who has actually gone through this journey, a very difficult one, I would love for you to share some of your insights of what made you do it and what were the challenges and how you solved them.
Thanks, Anish, for the nice introduction. I think you can all hear me, I believe. Thanks for coming. This is sort of like maybe sleepy time, snack time, whatever. So I think, so I'm now 68 years old. So I always say that Kerala state was born in 1956, and coincidentally, even though there's no causal connection, I was also born in 1956. Now, for the next 15 to maybe 17 years, so I entered medical school at the age of 17. I was like a parrot, basically. So I would just, I was born in a lower middle class family. My dad was in the army, not an officer or anybody like that. My mom was a homemaker. Anyway, so I just listened to what my teachers told me, what my parents told me, what everybody told me, and then studied and got good grades and got into medical school. Then suddenly the world opened up and so on. So unlike Anish, who finished his MBBS or medical degree in 4.5 to 5.5 years, including the house agency and so on, I took 14 years to finish my medical school. So if anybody wants to simply leave, they are welcome to do so. If you think you are wasting your time listening to somebody who needed like 14 years to finish the basic medical degree and so on. So I was in, so I might talk a little bit scattered. You can interrupt and so on, but I'm trying to connect the dots somehow, and anytime feel free to do something much more worthwhile. Anyway, so I was in Varkala 2 or 3 years ago, and we started chatting and so on. And when I said I'm retired, he was surprised, and you should still be teaching. And then I said that, yeah, I was a Parrot for the first 17 years. Took 14 years to finish my basic medical degree, and then another 3-4 years doing residency and so on. And then suddenly I got interested in AI. And it accidentally turns out that it took me 14 years to get my PhD. So I went to the United States in 90. I didn't have any background in computer science, artificial intelligence, or anything like that. So I just got excited by artificial intelligence techniques, listening to a talk, and I thought maybe AI can change medical practice for the better and so on. But it was very hard. So I had to learn the basics. I had to learn some calculus. I had to learn assembly language programming, discrete math, this, that, and I found that it was a long, long road. And my advisor was a very, very strict person, and so he was one of the leaders in the field. So my actually thesis committee member, Bruce Buchanan, he is one of the founders of the field of AI, and I got into graphical models, causal discovery, and so on. And my thesis advisor, Gregory Cooper, is actually one of the, again, founders of the field of graphical models, causal discovery, and so on. And it turns out he did medicine, but he did his bachelor's in computer science from MIT, went to Stanford and did an MD, PhD, and so on. So no comparison with me. I don't know why he took me as his student. But anyway, it took me 14 years. And then when I decided to retire, I figured out that I had worked exactly, taught in 3 places, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, then Vanderbilt, and then University of New Mexico. I added everything together. And it turned out to be 14 years. So I studied for the first 17 years as a Parrot. Then I studied in my own way for another 28 years. And after studying, whatever, if my math is correct, like 42, 43 years and so on, I just taught for 14 years. And if you ask me why I stopped teaching and so on, the honest answer is that I found out that if I had to continue to teach, I would have to go to school again. And I asked this manager in the Varkala research, so do you want me to go to school again to continue teaching? He said, no, you have learned enough, taught enough, and if you feel that you have, so then you can ask why I'm here. And this is basically what I have to say regarding my background and sort of a small autobiography.
Thank you for that. I mean, I just want to continue on the same narrative, right? So you were really early. So I would expect the field of medical informatics has not been around that long. So, how do you see this? How do you see, and mostly when you talk about medical informatics, it's mostly AI interacting with all the rest of machine learning in the larger sense. So how do you see AI influencing medicine? And where do you see things going, based on, like, I'm not expecting you to have a crystal ball. Let's be very clear. He has no crystal balls. I'm just asking him as somebody who has gone through a similar journey as me, having seen things and like question things. Like, that's the key thing I would point out. Like, you described yourself already as like having parroted for 17 years and suddenly recognized that's not something you want to do. Decided you will do medicine, and then when you finished, you recognize that's not what you want to do. When to do a PhD in a grad school, again, taught yourself all of this. I know for a fact firsthand, the journey is not an easy one. That clearly was a very, very hard one. And you had a front row seat in recognizing what is happening, the interaction between medicine and AI. How would you see this from your personal perspective in the past, what's happening now, and what's in the future?
Yeah, so again, future, as Anish said, I don't have any crystal ball. But so I came to, so can you hear me better? Okay. I came to biomedical informatics. It used to be called medical informatics with sort of high hopes. Medicine had somehow become an information science or medical information science because unlike old days when clinicians used to do physical exam and figure out things, investigations, then imaging, and different types of, I mean, everything, mostly imaging and lab-based methods, and then all the genomics, genetics, and different types of omics and so on, made it very difficult to make optimal decisions. So definitely computational methods, including AI, machine learning, learning from data, all these things have a legitimate role. But unfortunately, what also started happening is that clinical medicine became sort of went into the back burner. So I asked myself the question, am I comfortable talking to a robot or a software program instead of a physical interaction with a doctor? And my answer definitely is I want to talk to a doctor rather than to a machine and so on. But having said that, you could have some programs or software running in the background and they can do some prompting and so on. But ultimately, the decision has to be taken by a human being, and I think most patients would prefer that. Then in general, if you look at the trend of AI, I would say that AI has been hijacked for all the other purposes, for war making, for tracking people, for controlling them, and so on. And that is a big disappointment for the field. So I'm also part of, may or may not be of much interest, so an international union of scientists. So it is, I think the website is www.iuscientist.org. So I'm one of the founding members. So other people took the lead and so on. And the main goal for this, even though it was formed in the context of the Israel-Gaza conflict or Israel-Palestinian conflict, so a lot of funding is coming from defense, US, Europe, including India and other countries are actually investing heavily to leverage AI for war making and militarization of science. Basically, that is also happening parallelly and so on. And so that's a big concern in terms of privacy and abuse of science, I would say, for military purposes. So
you did mention there was some event that was happening here for IUS, the International Union of Scientists, happening in Trivandrum.
Actually, that is so. One big push, and I think they took the lead. So there is a science society. It's an activist science society, and they are very concerned about giving a proper scientific approach to the young people of the country. So it is, the Breakthrough Science Society is based in India, so it's not an international organization. So they actually were also concerned about use of computational methods, artificial intelligence, and even some sort of biological data and so on, whatever, whether you call it biometry or even DNA-based methods and so on. So there's always this conflict between ethical and good use or fair use of these techniques and use for one-upmanship in a military sense, for countries try to compete and try to sort of subjugate other people or take advantage in a bad way, I would say. So the Breakthrough Science Society was some of the leaders of the Breakthrough Science Society took the initiative they contacted different people in different countries, and so that is how it came together. But the Breakthrough Science Society is organizing its All India conference again to focus attention on science, scientific methods, fighting superstition, and keep science on the right track of, or the right side of ethics and morality and so on. So it is happening in Tagore Theatre on 8th, 9th, and 10th, and that's primarily the reason I'm here. So even though I visited Kerala in October and went back when I heard that the Breakthrough Science Society is having its All India conference in Trivandrum, which is my home city. So I came back, and that.
Can I be cheeky and ask the obvious question? If any of them have some time, if they wanted to attend, will it be possible for people?
Yeah. So there are open sessions, and I can forward the flyer to you, and you can put it on.
Sure, I'll definitely share
so
it.
I think 9th and 10th are delegate sessions, so there might be some more stricter requirements. But on 8th, there will be a lot of interesting sessions which will be open to everybody, and it's all in Tagore Theatre and inside the hall and also in the Pandal and so on. How exactly it's organized is not clear. But so you are all welcome to attend the open sessions if you have some time, definitely.
So I'm going to now challenge you. And I'm sorry if
Sure.
I am in the habit of challenging things. So you were mentioning about humans and human decision making in the framework of medicine. So I'm sure you've heard about Kosler, and probably you've read 20% doctor included. I'm assuming that's true, right? So my question is, like, there has been a bunch of studies that have shown that human decision biases are kind of costly for the patients. So given that as a frame of reference, again, this is a controversial question, and I'm just asking your personal opinion. You can articulate why you said that, so everybody gets a feel. Right? Everybody is looking at ML and AI ML and saying, wow, this is a savior. And yes, there are some benefits. I'm going to highlight some of it, because like when you take an ECG with a cardiologist, if you have some anomalies, there was I think, who published, I can't remember, one of the medical journals actually had this, where they had a bunch of things. I think it's cardiology and some oncology, and then they compared, like, whether the human or the machine was doing better. And human decision biases sometimes are not very helpful for the patient. At the same time, if you have array conditions, you are so ... if you go to an ML, right? So I want your view on, like, humans and human decision biases, machines, possible hallucinations, and other things. As a patient interacting with a medical system, where the medical system is mostly tailored to the 4 sigma. And, for the people in the audience who are wondering what this 4 sigma business is, so humans have a variation, right? When you have headache, when you take paracetamol, mostly, you might not know this, the test for paracetamol has been conducted on most likely a male Caucasian with the standard height and standard everything, not on a female, not on black, brown, or whatever else, right? So you have been normalized to a bell curve, which is the normal distribution curve, and both ends of the tail are cut off. More or less the thing in the middle is what you are supposed to represent. So when you have a headache, you've been given paracetamol, very likely what this means is, like, in that 4 sigma representation, they had a reduction in headache. That's the whole idea. So given that context, I would love for you to share your thoughts on ML versus humans, human decision biases versus hallucinations.
So Anish is exactly right. So basically, the biases come from the environment. I mean, we are not born, newborn babies don't come with biases and so on. So all the bias, all the learning, what we have is as human beings, the human brain. So we have some structures for, say, language or understanding and things like that. These things differentiate us from other animals and so on. But the learning comes from social interaction and society, and there are formal ways we learn in school and so on. And even that is, because always what goes into the school syllabus, starting from elementary school to whatever higher education, that's always in contention. And at some stage, we will be able to discriminate between some of this and maybe grade and so on. Till high school, it's much more difficult, but after that, it's possible. But once we grow up, and because we are learning from the society, so we also develop, nobody is free of bias. So we always need to fight against the bias, and it's a personal struggle. It's also a collective struggle based on which organizations. It can be a professional society, it can be an activist organization, it can be different types of organizations or committees and societies and so on. Now, the problem with programs is that they are trained on data which is mostly available on the web. And the emergence of social media as opposed to authoritative. So if there is a program which learns from authoritative textbooks or authoritative publication, I'm not saying that those don't have bias. I mean, people have made studies and shown that even the top journals like New England Journal of Medicine or Journal of the American Medical Association or any other field and so on, there are a lot of biases and things like that. But at least there is a vetting process, there is a peer review, and so if you train a technical model or a medical model on reliable medical information, then the chances of that being completely off track is much less. It can still make mistakes and so on. But now you have social media where people can basically post anything and so on. So we saw during the COVID pandemic how people were saying that bleach and this, that, and so on can cure COVID and all sorts of, you know all this, I don't have to repeat that. So a program which learns from all this will not be able to perform very well. So all these biases get factored into, so that's why it is not good to automate decision making beyond a point. So if you just let a software process, for example, the applications for admission to graduate school or undergrad and so on, that's not going to work well. An admissions officer, based on his or her struggle looking into applications and so on, will be able to do a much better job evaluating an undergrad application or a graduate application than a software program. So if you use these programs as filter, it will affect the minorities. It will only benefit the whatever is mainstream, or it will reinforce the biases and so on. And I think even though there's a lot of hype and so on about ChatGPT and similar models, or what are called these large language models or generative models, they're still, I mean, even compared to an elementary school kid, they are dumb in many other ways. So if you look into these models carefully, again, as Anish was saying, they will hallucinate and so on. So it is not easy to actually use these models for all types of decision making. So that's all I have to say on this. So we have to be very, very guarded, careful, and we should keep the human touch as much as possible for, I would say, complicated decision making. So there should be a clear vetting process before using any output of any of these models is what I have to say.
I have to admit, you have been reading my mind. So I was hoping I could ask him the question about air regulation, and it kind of shot me down ahead of. Do you would like to add anything more to this?
I would say that we have to be very, very careful with how AI is put to use. And whatever be the regulation, when there is a conscious and coordinated effort on the part of the powers that be, this includes the government, this includes the military, this includes the intelligence agencies, and so on. They have basically hijacked some of these models for their own ends. So I don't know what type of regulation is possible. Making AI systems do the decision making in an independent way for patients will do a lot of damage is what I think. So there should be strict regulation, but that should be done by not governmental agencies, but maybe by independent bodies and so on, as opposed to trusting the government to do these things. So that's what I have to say on that.
Thank you. I'm going to switch tacks and, kind of touch upon something where you have a lot of personal experience. And, I know there are a bunch of PhDs in the room and a bunch of other people who might or might not want to pursue PhDs or interdisciplinary research. So the question for you would be, given A, you've gone through the process, B, you have an academic and you have possibly PhD students for yourself, what would your advice be to researchers or students entering an interdisciplinary space?
So the only thing I would say that goes for a PhD, of course, if somebody can be passionate, somebody knows what they want to pursue, maybe a sub-branch of mathematics, maybe probability, and, or maybe astrophysics, or molecular biology, again, sub-discipline, and so, and they want to investigate that. You have to have a PhD for credibility purposes. But what I think is useful, even though you may not be that much focused on something. Of course, a PhD dissertation, you have to do something new and so on. What I found useful, so if you ask me what I gained from my PhD, so somebody can ask that you only, after getting your PhD, you did research and taught in 3 universities for 14 years or something, and then you just retired. You didn't even pursue that, so maybe you just wasted your PhD or something like that. So I was thinking, so when actually the pandemic started, I started learning a lot. So I thought, even though I took 14 years and became an activist and did this, that, and so on during my medical school, the basic medical training I found very useful when I tried to learn about the pandemic and so on. And my friends started asking questions, so I was reading most of the journals, whatever, everything was publicly available, and that was good. So then I gave some talks and so on, and somehow I thought that there's no textbook of COVID-19, and there are articles and so on, so there should be something in one place which will be like a historical record. Of course, it's all changing, and day by day newer papers are coming. So I talked to some of my colleagues, old collaborators, and so on, and then we decided to put together a textbook of SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. So what I'm trying to, if I hadn't done a PhD, and my PhD was not in medicine, even though it was artificial intelligence plus biomedical informatics and so on, it was mostly modeling and highly computational modeling and causal discovery and so on. So I got the confidence that if you have actually investigated even a subdiscipline and it was a narrow dissertation and so on, it somehow gives you the confidence to explore any other field and 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 contribute something related to that. You may not come up with, I mean, we didn't, none of the authors of these chapters came out with any profound discoveries or anything like that. But what we were able to do was I could put together a bunch of colleagues who were much more knowledgeable than me in the field, and I took the initiative or took the lead in writing 3 or 4 chapters. But I also understood that my chapter should be like the bronze standard. Everybody else, the other chapters should be silver or gold. My chapter should not be the gold standard. Then I have failed and so on. But anyway, so if I hadn't actually gotten my PhD, I would not have gotten the courage to explore when the pandemic is new. All the, established researchers and so on, different labs are working on different things. And why would somebody like me try to put together? And I approached, of course, he had much more high profile, so I approached a newborn medicine professor who I had collaborated with when I was at Vanderbilt. And he said, yeah, I can get a bunch of pediatrics guys. And I only asked him to contribute a chapter, and he said, see, I asked him to be the co-editor. So he and I actually then put together this. So his name is Hendrik Weitkamp, and so that his participation increased the credibility of the textbook, and it made my job much easier. So the short answer why you would do a PhD is, of course, if you are focused and if you want to make fundamental, foundational, or whatever contribution in that. But you can also leverage that, because if you are able to write a dissertation and get some papers out of it, you will have the confidence to actually explore any field and make a contribution. Maybe it would be a textbook, it would be a good review article, or something like that. It would be very appropriate to do that. You don't have to be trained in that new field to do that. Of course, it will be having gotten a PhD in artificial intelligence and biomedical informatics. So I would not be able to go into quantum mechanics or a branch of mathematics which is highly special. I wouldn't go there. But since I have a medical background, I thought that trying to put together a COVID edited textbook with colleagues and so on with a co-editor would be manageable. And when we put together a proposal, Elsevier was very supportive, and they put in the resources to get it done.
Yeah, I'm going to ask one more question, and then it will be everybody's free to go, okay? So my question to you, we actually had a whole week of longevity. And you are somebody who is uniquely placed because you have a medical background, you have expertise in machine learning and all the rest of it, and you've seen the data, and I'm sure you have some insights to what things are, how interventions work, and you definitely work on causal graphs and things of that sort, which very rare people, people in medicine very rarely look at causal graphs. So here we have an opportunity to ask this question about longevity, the various interventions, and using causal graphs and the tools that you have seen. Your view. It could be contrary, and if you feel so, feel free to articulate as much as you like.
So I will. It's a good question. There's a lot of investment going on. People are, trying to after they pass, trying to put their. I don't know. They don't call it remains or anything. They are after they pass, they are holding their bodies in a frozen state, hoping that at some point, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, or I don't know when, they can sort of
It's
come
called
back to life.
Yeah, it's called cryopreservation. So what he's referring to is there's a cryopreservation institute, and you could either have just your head or you can have the whole body. So that's
Yeah, thanks, Anish, for that technical term. And there are also other, I don't know, they seem to me like new age physicians who are focused on extending people's life by doing all sorts of testing right and left, strict diet control, things like that. I mean, taking it, I mean, they are in this as like any other business, or I mean, cutthroat business, I would say. So there are all these methods, and some people really believe from a scientific perspective that age is just a number, and there is probably a way to extend human life infinitely and so on. I mean, based on, so I don't know the scientific answer to that question, whether that is even possible. All I can say is that based on my experience with, so a classmate of mine who was a good friend of mine, and in those days, he was a fellow activist, and he continued to be a fellow activist, and so on. He passed away recently, but during COVID time, so I used to visit every year. He was a close friend, and to talk with him and spend time with him was one of the motivations to come every year. But suddenly in 2021, he developed seizure, and then went into what is technically called a minimally conscious state. So more or less like, I mean, calling somebody in a remaining like a vegetarian. So he couldn't even recognize me and so on when I met him finally after the COVID sort of resolved and so on. So he was taken care of well by friends and his immediate family, but he continued in that state for 3 years. So seeing that, plus so I am 68, so from 56 you can easily calculate that I have completed 68 years. My mom is still around, and she is 98 actually. But she had a hip fracture 3 years ago, so I live in sort of not on the East Coast, but she used to live with my sister, and my sister has some additional memory issues and things like that. So she needed help, and so my wife and I, we temporarily moved to California in the Bay Area to take care of my mom. But unfortunately, before we could actually, so we rented an apartment, and we were planning to get her. She had a hip fracture, and then we had to take her to surgery and so on. And she needed so much care after that she had to be in an assisted living facility. So we had to move back after being there for 6 months because it's very expensive. And to three of so my sister cannot work because she has memory issues and so on. But so I have 3 siblings. So the 3 siblings who are working, and I'm retired. So to keep her in an assisted living facility actually costs us $4,000 per month for each of us. So it is like $12,000 per month. That's like more than 10 lakhs in Indian rupees per month. So she has some, but cognitively she's sharp and so on. So it's worth, we are doing that, and it's worth doing that. But beyond a point, you'll see one, not, I mean, it's barely affordable for us. So how long we can continue to do this, I really don't know. But we have been doing this for now like about 2 years now, almost 2 years. In 2023, early March, she sustained. So it's going to be almost 2 years. So there is a cost factor there. And the quality of life, so she cannot even actually move around in a wheelchair because she has additional issues. So if you put her in a wheelchair and keep her upright, she goes into orthostatic hypotension. Her blood pressure falls and she has to be immediately put horizontally. And so the quality of life, so sometimes she herself says that, what is this quality of life? So I'm not, in short, so based on, let's say this, there are also other experiences from my wife's side. My mother-in-law had a hip fracture. Fortunately, she recovered very well and she's able to move around and so on. But her sisters are not doing well. So I'm sure that many of you have relatives, older relatives or elderly relatives who are struggling. So I'm not a big fan of longevity. And people say that age is just a number, and now medicine and science has advanced that you can live for a long time. And I think so. There is a demographic change, and it puts a lot of pressure on the younger generation. So when they have to take care of elderly people, and you are also putting pressure once. So I'm at a stage. I'm putting. So I have only one son. So I tell him I'm not going to expect you to take care of me and my wife. Or you don't need to take care of your parents. We are sick and so on. You come and say hello, spend a few days with us, and then otherwise, he's 30 and I'm 68 now, and if he has to take care of his parents, that is me and my wife, for the next 20 years. He's working on his PhD actually. So what will he become? And then after that he will be 50, and then he's married now. He doesn't have any children. So this creates a bad vicious cycle. So anyway, based on my experience and based on thinking through it, I think if you can live healthy, I'm ready to go anytime. I tell my wife I have lived for 68 years and so on. I've tried to try to change things in a way. I have failed miserably or badly or whatever. So we have. You are all the young people here. We have passed the.
That's not true. There's somebody in the audience slightly older than you.
And but I have some regrets in the sense that the world was in a lot of ways a much better place when I was 17 or 18. So there's global warming, there is climate change, there are all sorts of war going on in Europe, in Middle East, and already. So I'm a U.S. citizen now, even though I'm also an overseas citizen of India and so on. Our esteemed president, or not so esteemed president, whatever, he came along as a joker, but now people realize that he's not a joker anymore. So he wants to annex Greenland. He already calls Canada the 51st state, and whatever. I don't know. So we have failed. My generation, I would say, has failed miserably to give a better world for you people. So I have regrets about that. I don't know whether I should apologize for that, but at least I can say sorry for that. But I don't know. Me and some of my friends tried to take it in a different direction, and it didn't work well. So here I am, and so that's all. I know some of this may feel depressing and so on, but as I was telling Anish, you can ask any question. If I can answer, I will answer. But what I will do is I will always tell honestly. So that is what I'm telling. So my talk here is a very honest answer, an open answer. And actually, Anish volunteered to send me questions ahead of time to think through. I said that will not work very well. So I'm not here to give any cookie cutter type of answers and so on. You ask any question, if I can answer, I will give an honest answer. And my knowledge is very limited, and I'm not a profound thinker or anything like that. I just answer honestly to the best of my ability based on my lived experience. That's all I can do, and I think that's a fair way to answer questions. So.
Thank you for offering us this opportunity. So we have audience questions. Here you go.
Yeah. My question is, how important is curiosity for scientists or people who are in science endeavor? Because I oftenly see some of my colleagues who are in science doing science purely transactional or just career driven, just as a job that they want to do, take up a PhD just for, saving a career, just as a pure career option, rather than what I think essentially is curiosity should drive scientific pursuit, and then this could bring out like different sort of science inventions and so on. Because if I look at your career, I think curiosity might have played a bigger role in driving you towards different fields, wanting to learn more and spend this much time in understanding science in general. So what do you think about curiosity as a factor for people who are in science these days?
So I'm not a role model for anybody for anything. Some people think I'm a totally like failed state, a failed person, or so even my sister was telling me that yeah, you are like a rolling stone, but so you are exactly right in one sense. So curiosity actually. So I don't really care about the career and so on. So if I feel interested in something, so I was telling Anish that one reason why I decided to retire was so this is a little bit. I'll come to that, but it's also related to curiosity. So yeah, I told something about my background, and so after being a parrot for 17 years, when I got into medical school, I found that I'm the dumbest person in class, even though I had very good grades. So we didn't have entrance exam in those days. My MBBS batch, or the entering batch, is 1973, where 1/3 of the seats only were reserved for the pre-degree students or high school students, and 2/3 were reserved for the BSc students. So, so being a parrot has some sort of benefits in that you just parrot things, and so it has a benefit in a limited sense. You may be able to get into, but then you find that you are one of the dumbest persons. You have no understanding of the world. You have no understanding of anything. So I found that my friends had read a lot of books. They were well versed in literature. They were well versed in films and so on. I hadn't seen any good movies. I hadn't really read widely or read good novels and so on. I couldn't even understand literature. So I was talking about my friend who unfortunately passed away after having been in this minimally conscious state for 3 years. And his parents, both of them were Malayalam teachers, and so he had an in-depth understanding of literature and things like that. It took me a long time to really even understand what literature is, and so I always say that my milestones for anything are all delayed actually. See, in pediatrics, so you evaluate newborns and infants based on when they do certain things, when they start crawling, when they start sitting up, when they start walking, when speech develops, and so on. And for some of these kids, it's delayed. So it's a technical term like delayed milestone. So I always consider that many of my milestones were delayed. But after I retired, or in my 60s or mid-60s, 2 or 3 years ago, I became sort of curious about literature, and I started reading, and I also joined a group who were interested in some writing and some creative writing and so on, and that was so curiosity should drive anything, whether it is science, whether it is humanities. So if somebody says that yeah, I'm going into science to become a professor or a big scientist in a pharma company, and my advice is don't do that. Or if I want to become a sprinter to win a gold medal in Olympics, don't do that. You want to become a sprinter because that excites you. That's fun. You don't go into tennis simply because you want to win a Grand Slam title, or no, that should not be the approach. If you enjoy, but again, everything has become so. I mean, we can see how things have changed. I mean, even Olympics and so on, and even the school festivals now. When you, so it was not, school festivals were not like that 50 years ago. I mean, somebody had some curiosity, nascent talent, interest, and it was all an amateur field. Now everything has become professionalized in a big way, and I don't know how to evaluate that. But I would say that nobody should pursue something to build a career out of it in that sense. So curiosity should drive science. Curiosity should drive anything, basically. And after some time, you will get some recognition. You may not, and then curiosity will lead you to another field and so on. And then you should be willing to take a chance like that. And then if you are interested in making money, then you should go to business. And I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. If somebody wants to make money, they are free to do that. But they shouldn't pursue certain things. They shouldn't pursue science, or they shouldn't pursue sports to make money. That's what I think. And that they are doing it the wrong way. Many people may not agree with what I'm saying, but that's my opinion. So I'm giving my honest opinion regarding that. So that's a good question. And so in a lot of ways, curiosity has driven me, but somebody will say that that's your failure also, maybe. So I'm okay to take failures. So that's fine.
Thank you for that. I have a question, doctor. One topic that's been fascinating for me of late is, organ computing or organoid intelligence. If you could share your perspective both from like the technology aspect and as well as an ethical aspect on that, that'll be helpful.
So I didn't clearly understand your question.
I found that a lot of, there's a lot of research around organoid intelligence where they sort of build dish brains out of stem cells and they use that for compute.
Oh, so you're talking about...
organ computers, basically.
So biological computers.
Yeah, biocomputers. I just want to understand your ethical viewpoint as well as purely from...
No, ethically, it's okay. What I find problematic is that if you are using AI methods, they won't have any ethics, because ethics and morality comes from our state of being human, actually. So a machine doesn't have any ethics. That's why, as we said earlier, they develop all this. We also develop biases, but we have some ethical, moral fiber. But there are people like, one best example is the current U.S. president. I mean, he doesn't have any moral fiber, ethical fiber, and you can see. I don't have to name everybody, but he's not the only one political leader without a moral, ethical fiber. There are others, and if you open your eyes, you will be able to see them. But biological computing, they were trying to do some parallel computing using DNA and so on. I didn't see any ethical problem with that. But again, if you are using methods based on AI or machine intelligence and so on to make ethical, moral decisions, they don't have that capability. They'll never have that capability. These are human concepts, and the brain based on evolution. See, even if you observe small babies and so on, and infants. So if three infants are playing, maybe they are 6 months old or 7 months old and so on, and if one infant snatches the toy of another, the third one will feel that that's not right. So you have that concept developed very, very early on, actually. I don't think the machines can have that. They can do a lot of things, so they can compute much better than us. But they are training also, so that's also interesting. So people have looked into this. So the machine or the software program which defeated the best Go player or the chess player and so on, they have been trained. So somebody calculated and said that a human being, based on that, the training that went into this is like millions and millions of years of human years of training has gone into that. So from that perspective, these machines are very, very, very dumb, actually.
Guys, so we are kind of running low on time. There will be 2 slots. Oh, wow, the hands go up. Okay. So I was about to suggest, auctioning.
So I'm trying to understand when you're saying machines are dumb currently, and already we have broken, let's say, the records of human players, machines going beyond human players in terms of chess and Go. So if you think on terms of the human knowledge representation, don't you think that there is a possibility of machines going beyond our understanding as well, or whether they have already exceeded that? Like, for example, if I talk about, so there is an open source project where what they did is they had, so there are 40, they have 40 words, and they arrange all the words in all possible arrangements possible, like all English words possible, 40 combinations. Let's say one sentence would be yes, another sentence would be yes, comma, no, something like that. So 40 arrangements and all possible arrangements that you can have. And they put all these in different, let's say, different areas. And they try to understand what would be the best approach where we can represent our entire knowledge as a connection across these. So I'm trying to understand, like, let's say if a machine is able to grab something like this, then isn't it also fathoming the entire knowledge system and something similar? Like, so I'm trying to understand, like, why is it that we inherently say that machines are dumb? Is it something specific that you have knowledge of, that you are like willing to share with us, or is it something that you have seen during your computational career that you feel that we are more capable of, and machines will never be able to do that, something like that?
So I don't know whether I understood the question correctly. So if you are asking whether machines can become more intelligent and sort of take over the world, I personally don't think, because these machines or the AI systems are created by human beings. They can cause a lot of destruction. Like a simple example is the pagers the Israeli army used in Lebanon and so on. So a lot of these gadgets started explode. So you can have things like that happening, and people can be programmed, and maybe somebody can come up with I don't know, some sort of sophisticated weapon which they can then use to assassinate based on some DNA sequence provided, things like that. I mean, but these are like malevolent things manufactured with a purpose, using science. But I don't think robots can become super intelligent and somehow take over the world, because these have been created by the human mind. And I think based on evolution over millennia or multi-millennia, the human brain has evolved, and I don't think machines can take over us, even though that's my opinion. But again, there are people who think that that's a big threat. Robots will take over and subjugate us and so on. But I don't know whether I'm answering your question or I'm answering a different question as I understood you.
Last of the questions. Okay.
What trends are you seeing in medicine where we're using machine learning technology to improve like interpretation of MRI or like thin CT?
Yeah, so there have been many attempts to incorporate machine learning methods, particularly, and other AI methods in medical decision making. I would say that based on my experience, so I don't have recent experience regarding that. They have been of limited use, so they have not come to a stage where they can independently interpret and give opinions and so on. Of course, so a program may be able to interpret the EKG better than a cardiologist. That can happen, or MRI images. But if you really go into it, then so it's always a question of sensitivity and specificity. So it has to be evaluated in a proper environment and so on. So generally, I find that it's not exactly your question, but these investigations, particularly imaging techniques and so on, has also contributed to further unnecessary investigation and things like that. So generally, I mean, this may not be applicable to everybody. So I try to stay away from doctors and physicians as much as I can. That doesn't mean that if I develop pneumonia or something, I won't consult a doctor and start myself on antibiotics, or if I fall down and break my hip, it has to be fixed and so on. Those are all. But so I will tell you another example. So my mom, so I introduced my mom's situation and so on. So after her hip fracture was fixed, she fell down and she sustained a rib fracture and nothing had to be done. So I had to take her to the Stanford ER, and the attending, he asked me, I would recommend a whole body scan for her to rule out some other fracture. And she was like, so I told him, I was like a little bit upset by his comment, and I told him that no, I don't think so. She doesn't clinically. So he's not. They're not clinically going like that. So they're trying to. I got the feeling that one, he's practicing defensive medicine, and second, it's also generating business for the ER and Stanford Hospital and so on. I said, it's lunchtime. She's looking forward to her lunch, basically soup and some rice or bread, whatever will work for her. I don't think I'm interested in subjecting my 97-year-old mom for a whole body scan and so on. So if you do that, they will find something, and then they will then say that, yeah, we have to further investigate. Now this whole body CT scan is what we did. Maybe we want to do a whole body or whatever, MR and regular plus contrast, and I don't know. So these are the issues I find with some of these methods. So they will point to some things which again will lead to additional. So ultimately, it can do more damage, and I think there are some studies. Again, these studies can be a little bit equivocal and so on. So for particularly for prostate imaging, there was this issue that and even for, so they changed these guidelines, breast imaging, mammograms and things like that. So now the guidelines have been shifted because there was this false positives and further investigation and things like that. So I would say that machine learning methods and image processing methods, again based on machine learning and AI and so on, should be used carefully and with human minds also interpreting and judging, so that we don't overdo these things. And I think no program is sufficiently sophisticated and developed and reasonable also to be allowed to make decisions on their own. So that's my take on that.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. It was very kind of you to, offer us your insights. We have a talk coming up shortly. Thank you again very much. You can always find him in the coffee shop, most likely. You could walk up to him. Now you all have an intro. All your questions, please give up a hand to Professor Subramani.
Thanks, Anish, and thank you all very much. This was fun, and as I said, with my limited experience, I gave an honest opinion to your questions.